This is the L3 Leadership Podcast, episode number 251. Hey podcast family, and welcome to another episode of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host, and in today's episode, you'll actually hear me being interviewed by my friend and mentor, Andrew Olsen. This was an interview that we did on leadership for his podcast, which is the Rainmaker Fundraising Podcast, and Andrew is an incredible leader. He's a friend, he's a mentor, and let me just tell you a little bit about him before we dive into this interview. Andrew is a #1 best-selling author, speaker, and nonprofit marketer. He's helped raise more than $250 million for nonprofits. He has more than 20 years of leadership experience. He also currently advises nonprofit leaders, boards, and development teams through strategic consultation, coaching, and classroom instruction. He's the senior vice president at Newport ONE and an instructor at the University of St. Thomas Opus College of Business. And again, as I mentioned, he is so insightful, and I will certainly be interviewing him in the future for this podcast. But he asked me to be a part of his podcast, and it was an honor, and we talked about leadership. I think you're going to hear some things that you may not have heard from me before, some stories, and I think this will add a ton of value to your life. So I hope you enjoy it. But before we dive into the interview, just a few announcements. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Baritone Advisors. The financial advisors at Baritone Advisors help educate and empower clients to help make informed financial decisions. Find out how Baritone Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future. Please visit their website at Baritone Advisors, that's BERATUNG, advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through Waddell & Reed, Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Baritone Advisors, Waddell & Reed, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. Hey leader, we tell you all the time that you should never do life alone, but in community. And so my question to you is, do you have a community of leaders that you can do life with? If you don't, I want to encourage you to become a part of our community, the L3 Leadership Community. And there's lots of ways to connect with us, but one I specifically want you to connect with is our membership platform. We've spent the last 4 months revamping and relaunching our membership site, and I could not be more excited about it. When you become a member of L3 Leadership, you're going to get to jump on live webinars with nationally known leaders. In fact, our next live webinar is in May, and we're going to have Carrie Newhoff joining us, and you'll get to learn from Carrie, and you'll have an opportunity to interact and connect with him as well. And we're going to be having these every single month for our members only. You'll have access to all of our L3 one-day talks. You'll have access to every course that we ever create, and so much more. And all of this is available right now for free. That's right, we are offering 2 months of free membership, and after that, it's just $25 a month. And so, leader, let me just tell you, you need to invest in yourself, and we believe so much in the platform and that it will add value to you that, again, we're offering your first 2 months free. So you can learn more about membership and sign up today at l3leadership.org/membership. And with all that being said, let's dive right into the interview. Here's my interview with Andrew Olsen from the Rainmaker Fundraising Podcast. Hey, this is Andrew Olsen with the Rainmaker Fundraising Podcast. I'm super excited. This is the first in a special series of conversations on leadership that we're hosting, and I'm thrilled that my friend Doug Smith has joined me for this conversation. Doug, welcome to the show. Andrew, it's an honor, and I appreciate your leadership, and it's been fun to watch you grow and develop over the last, 8 or 9 years that I've known you, and it's just an honor to be on your show. Very proud of you, my friend. Likewise, my friend. So for our listeners, Doug is Director of Development at Light of Life Rescue Mission, but he's also founder and president of L3 Leadership. And I will just tell you, Doug is probably the most positive and engaging person that I know. So I am super excited to get a chance to hear from him today and to talk leadership experience with Doug. So again, Doug, thanks for being here. Tell us a little bit about L3 Leadership. Yeah, so L3 Leadership, I became passionate about leadership when I was a teenager, probably around 18 years old, when someone told me for the first time in my life that I was a leader. I don't know if we have time to go into my whole story, but I was a drug dealer in high school, and really my life was headed nowhere really, really fast. I had to go to summer school every year just to get to the next grade, and really never thought that I would ever amount to anything. Never thought I would do anything with my life. My dad's a bus driver, and so obviously there's nothing wrong with being a bus driver, but I just thought, hey, I'll be a bus driver or janitor, no big deal. And I lost my mom my senior year of high school, and that through an experience of faith in that experience, turned my life around and had several mentors come into my life and tell me that I had leadership potential and tell me that I could make a difference with my life. And I believed them. And really that started this whole journey of leadership development. And I'm sure we'll get into that more. But about 5 years ago, I really felt a responsibility, to be honest with you, to give to others and do for others what was done for me through mentorship. And so we started this organization called L3 Leadership, and we are obsessed with helping people grow to their maximum potential and to maximize the impact of their leadership. And so we do that through 5 different things that we do. We have a podcast as well. And so we come out with content every single week for free. It's usually a mix of interviews where I interview high-level leaders, and then I do personal lessons as well. We have a membership platform where you can actually join. And in the membership platform, we do live monthly calls where you get access to globally known leaders and you have a chance to ask them questions and learn from them. We have courses and all kind of fun stuff on the back end of our membership platform. We do mastermind groups. This is our bread and butter. This has been the biggest source of growth in my life. And so we intentionally get people together in mastermind groups that meet on a consistent basis to grow. We've partnered with a nonprofit in our city to do a leadership collaborative. And then we do a one-day leadership conference as well. And so all of those things have one intention in mind, that's to add value to leaders.
That's awesome. So I think for our listeners, it should be clear that Doug knows a thing or two about leadership. So let's jump into it. Talk to me about, how would you describe your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, so John Maxwell's my hero. So someone handed me a John Maxwell CD when I was 17. This was actually the start. A mentor handed me it, and I listened to the CD. I knew nothing about personal development, and I literally, after I listened to the CD, I called my mentor and I said, give me everything you have. And John's been the most influential leader in my life for the past 17 years, and so I pretty much adopt any leadership philosophy that he has. And at its basic root, I believe that leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And so whether you influence one or you influence millions, I believe that you're a leader. At the end of the day, you have to at least lead yourself. If you are in a family, you have to lead your family. If you're in an organization, you probably have influence and leadership over some amount of people or responsibility. And so I just come from the premise that everyone's a leader and everyone needs to grow to their maximum potential. And if they do, they'll maximize that leadership impact that they can have. And at the end of the day, it's all about people. If people aren't better as a result of leadership, then you shouldn't be in leadership. I think a lot of people get into leadership because they want the perks and they think that it comes with all these great things until they're in it and they get punched in the face. I see you smiling and laughing. I mean, to be honest with you, and we might get into this, I became director of development almost 2 years ago now. And actually, I didn't even want the position, to be honest with you. And again, I'm a person of faith. And so through a series of circumstances, I felt like the Lord was leading me to take the position. And now 2 years later, it was a painful year and a half to start off that job, but I feel like I was baptized in kindergarten in leadership and have really had to grow and develop. And I just learned that leadership often sucks. Something that's helped me immensely is John Maxwell has been saying recently that if you're a leader, there will never be 2 easy consecutive days in your life. And I've just adopted that as a leadership philosophy because I have yet to see that happen since I stepped into this leadership role.
Oh man, I might need to get that as a tattoo. That's really good right there. So based on what you said, I think you'd agree with me. If someone is not leading themselves well behind closed doors, I feel like it's impossible to lead well publicly.
Yes.
Unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I mean, again, I quote John all the time, but it's true. It's like, if you wouldn't follow yourself, why should anyone else? And I think sometimes people go into leadership because they just want people to follow them when they wouldn't even follow themselves. So yeah. And I was doing a call yesterday with, I was the only male speaker on a female conference. It was called Chic Influencer. And I was just talking to people about, I think right now people are either realizing that they have done the leadership development they needed to become the person they need to be on the inside to lead through crisis, or they haven't. And I think this is when we're realizing why we need to become bigger and grow bigger on the inside and be able to lead ourselves. Because if you can't lead yourself in a crisis, how are you ever going to lead other people through crisis? And so it's everything. And so if you're not growing and developing on a daily basis, you're in for a rough road. That's all I can say.
So you've interviewed a ton of different leaders from many different sectors. I'm curious to know what's the like, if you had to pick one thing, what's the number one piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
So I'm about to turn 35 years old. I would say the most consistent answer that I think is fascinating, and I don't know your audience, but I think for young leaders, this is the best advice I ever heard. I always ask the question, if you could go back and have coffee with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them? And I would say at least 75% of the leaders I interview say in one way or another, just relax. Relax and realize that all the dreams and aspirations in your heart, like, they're going to happen if you do the right thing, if you just grow and develop. And they say over and over again, like, do not miss the journey on the way there, and don't look down on the season of development. We all need developed, and the reality is, for until we're in our prime, it's going to be 10, 15, 20 years before you get into the leadership role that may be in your heart when you're 20. And again, going back to something that John said, he just said, listen, in the beginning, you're not very good, and just be okay with that. And, I think about the past 2 years, like, mistakes I've made. It's just like, oh my goodness. And you just want to tell people, like, listen, I know I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. Just give me a chance. Let me grow. But what he said is so good. He said, but if you do things right and you grow, in the end, you're not as good as people think. And somewhere in between those two is where you should live. And so I think more than anything, it's just enjoy the journey, do what you're supposed to do, grow every day, and it'll all turn out right. And don't stress out about, am I going to be, I actually put this quote on my thing. John said this, he said on my LinkedIn today, he said, it was never on my bucket list to be number one, but it's always been on my bucket list to be the best that I could be. And I think that speaks straight to the heart of what those leaders are getting at.
That's interesting. Okay. So next question, I'm curious about, you already talked a little bit about this in your intro, but what do you think the most important values are that a leader can demonstrate to those in her or his care?
Yep. I think you have to lead by example. I think that's huge. You have to value people and actually show that you care. But I'm also learning. So my nature is to naturally care for people. I value people. I'm very relational. But I've also had to learn, and I'm still learning, to be honest with you, people also value candor. And you can be a people pleaser all day and encourage people all day, but if you're not going to have the strength to tell people the truth and tell them what they need to hear to grow, eventually you'll lose their respect and you'll stop leading. And so that's been a hard thing, but I think you have to value people, but also value candor and actually helping people versus just making them happy. I think that's huge. For me, one of our values at L3 Leadership is character. And we believe the character development is the most important development. I was on a call the other day. I was interviewing someone, and we were just talking about someone that we look up to that's in their 70s. And I think in our generation, it's so easy to look up to someone that's in their 30s and 40s and say, wow, I just want to follow everything they say, and everything they say is brilliant. But to be honest with you, and this is including me, like, our leadership hasn't stood the test of time. It's great that I'm leading well at 35, but I really admire and look up to and want to learn from those leaders that are 70, 75, 85, and still have their marriage intact, still have their family intact, have done great things, but their life is more complete and they had the character to get them through. And so we always just tell people, focus more on your character development than anything else, because if you don't, you'll never make it to your leadership finish line. My pastor always tells me, he said, I think about 2% of leaders make it to their finish line, and it's primarily always character issues. And so more than anything, grow your character. And I think when you do that, you do lead example for your team and raise the bar for their character as well. And I think that's huge.
That's good stuff. Character and candor. I love that. Let's talk about this. How do you approach this, and what have you seen work best? Obviously in leadership, you can't force people to do things they don't want to do, right? So no matter how hard we try, and I'll tell you, early in my career, I thought force was the way to do it, and I've learned painfully that it's not. But so what have you learned about how a great leader brings people along with them on the journey to get from point A to the leader's desired point B, but in a way that doesn't damage relationships?
Yep. So back to the candor. This is something I'm not naturally strong in. And this was actually one of my pain points of 2019 and leadership growth, to be honest with you. So I can just tell you what I'm learning. I can't speak from like, hey, I'm so good at this. But what I am learning is on the candor end, something that really set me free. I actually had the opportunity to have lunch with John Maxwell in January. And I sat down and I said, listen, I have this huge lid in my life and my leadership that I'm so relational and I care so much about what other people think that I'm unable to lead them the way I want to. And he looked at me and he said, Doug, I understand that. He's like, actually, my CEO, I've had the same conversation with him. And he said to his CEO, he said, Mark, the good news is everybody loves you. The bad news is your leadership isn't enough to get people to where they need to go for the journey for our organization. And that resonated so much. And I said, well, how did he grow? And John actually said, well, I had to go through that same journey. So I said, please just speak into my heart and tell me what I need to do. And this is going to be my statement of the year, maybe the statement of my 30s. But he just looked at me, and I don't know why this went off, but he just said, Doug, you have to make the decision to always love people, but not depend on their love. I'll say that again, because literally that changed everything.
That's huge.
Yeah. Doug, you always make the decision to always love people, but not to depend on their love. And so, and actually, all these interviews I'm doing, I interviewed someone else that mentored him and asked him the same thing. And he actually challenged this person, which I'm doing this week. He said, now, if you're in that transition, I want you to journal and I want you to make 2 columns. And I want you to make a column of Doug before and Doug the leader after. And when you come up with that, let's share that with your team. And so I'm working on that right now. Hey, here's how Doug used to operate. I used to not be honest with people because I wanted them to like me. And I didn't, even if I was disappointed in their performance or whatever, I used to just, et cetera. But the new Doug, hey, I'm going to love you. I'm going to care about you, but I'm not going to depend on your love. And I'll love you enough to always be honest with you. So that's an example. And I plan on sitting before my team. Now, I have acted on that since my lunch with John. And I would just say, and he helped me through these conversations, but just sitting down with a team member and telling them that you love them and that you care for them, but telling them that you love and care for them enough to be honest with them. And then for me, I've had to learn and grow a lot in the art of how to have hard conversations. And I actually have a system, and I don't know if you can include tools, but there's a tool we use at Light of Life called the information wheel. And it's a process to help you talk out or write out a conversation. And so I actually take that before I have any hard conversation and I'll write it out. And to give you some examples, it's basically like, hey, what is the sensory data? So what is the issue going on? And then you say, what are the facts? And then you write out in journal, what am I thinking, which is really helpful. And then you write, what am I feeling? And then you go through a whole section on what are my wants. So what are my wants for the person I'm talking to? What are my wants for me? What are my wants for our team? And what are our wants for the organization? And I share those with the people. And then basically you talk about action steps and say, hey, in the past, I haven't been honest with you. And so this may come as a total shock for you. But my current actions are I'm currently going to be honest with you and I'm going to tell you the truth. And I promise to do that from now on. And in the future, these conversations should be easier and pretty consistent. And it should just be a coaching relationship. So I write out that conversation. I have it with the individual. When I meet with them, I say, hey, I'm going to share this whole thing. And I just want you to listen. Please don't interrupt. And after I share it, I want you to repeat back to me what you heard. And then that gives them an opportunity to say, well, hey, I heard this, this, and this. And they either heard you accurately or they didn't. And then you say, okay, yeah, you heard me correctly. Now, what do you think? And then you do the same thing. Hey, listen to them. And you just have a conversation. And I think that leads to the conversations you need to put some intentional change plans, or what we call them, into place and just help people grow. And just, I think this goes back to leading by example. Don't ask someone to grow and tell them that they need to do more if they don't see you doing that. If you want to talk about teachability, we have a quarterly retreat every week, every quarter with our team. And one of the questions we always ask with our team in this retreat are, hey, is there anything causing disunity or distrust or holding our team back? And one retreat in 2019, the team was very candid with me. And it was awkward, right? My whole team's there. And basically this one team member said, Doug, you're the lid. And I thought, that's special. Thank you. And, I just sat there and I'm like, okay. And everyone's nodding their head. I'm like, okay. But as a leader, what do you do in that situation? For me, I heard it. I received it. I assessed it. They were right. And so I had to change and adapt. And I changed and adapt and I grew. And I'm not perfect, but it made me more self-aware. It made the team realize that I'm not only going to ask them to change, but they can ask me to change, because we all need to grow better together. And so I hope that helps, but that would be my process and what I would tell you for coaching people and getting them to move in the direction you want them to.
Yeah, I think that's really insightful. And it's really interesting to me that your team was able to give that feedback, because one of the things I hear all the time from leaders is I can't get candid feedback from my team, right? And a lot of that's about the culture that we establish and how we create that conversation about feedback. So, it sounds like you've for all the challenges that you've had, there's a really intentional way that you've developed that conversation internally so that people feel comfortable and safe to give that feedback, right?
Yeah, and I'll just say that. So we do that in our quarterly retreats, and that's not an open invitation for me. It's really on our team, and we certainly wrestle through other issues. But in my one-on-ones with everyone that reports to me, I'm always asking, leaders say that all the time, but 2 questions for the leaders that say they don't get feedback. One is, do you ask for it? Here's a novel thought. If you've never asked for it, no wonder you haven't got it. The second thought is, if you've received it, what did you do with it? Did you get defensive and shut the person down and say you're an idiot? If you did, you're going to be surrounded with people who will never give you feedback and never say anything to you because they're intimidated by you. You have to model teachability. And if you're not teachability, that's your lid as a leader, and that will hold you back for the rest of your life until you learn to be teachable. And last thing on teachability, I've actually been credited for being too teachable, but again, this goes back to the sensitivity of being a people pleaser. Like, I'll hear one person say, you got to do this. I'm like, okay. And before, I would say in my growth journey that I would adapt to feedback just to make people happy versus adapting because I wanted to get better. And so I've had to learn to actually say, okay, is this something I actually need to grow in, or is this something I'm just doing to please this person? And that's been a world of difference in growing.
Awesome. So I want to ask, and I get your candid take on this. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken as a leader, and what did you learn from that?
Oh, geez. Well, risk management has never been a strong suit of mine. I'm growing in that area. For me, it's a risk starting L3 leadership and jumping out there. It was a risk taking the new role as director of development. I think throughout your leadership journey, you're always going to have to take risks. I would always say it's worth it. When people on their deathbed, they usually, one of the major things they have regrets about is they didn't take any risks. And so as a leader, and if you're going to grow, you're going to have to take risks and realize you're going to fail, and it's okay. It's how you respond in failure, right? Actually, I was just having a review with my boss yesterday, and my first board meeting as director of development was a huge failure. Actually, I'll just be real candid. That's just who I am. Andrew, anyway, a company and someone I know developed a report for us, and I thought it was really good. So I handed it out to the board members, but I couldn't explain anything on it. And so my first board meeting, all these board members start looking into these reports and asking me questions. And I just shut down. I'm like, I don't know. And they're like, why would you give us a report you don't know how to explain? And so, you want to talk about walking home with your tail in between your legs, but in the midst of failure and taking risks, what happened? Man, I could have gave up. I could have quit. I could have said, I'm not meant for this, but I got back up again. And so, and I determined, anytime you take a risk and fail, just make the determination that you'll never do that again. And every board meeting I've had since has been great. And I've earned the board's trust and respect. But that came through massive, massive failure. But 2019 was a brutal year for me because of the risk of taking on this new role. But 2020 has been unbelievable. And I would say without having to go through 2019, I would have never made it to 2020. And there was at least a dozen times in 2019 where I just wanted to throw in the towel and just go crawl in a hole and never come out. So risks are always worth it. Just realize you're going to fail and be willing to get back up and develop tenacity. It's the only way you'll grow.
All right. Thank you. I know we're close to time for you here. One more question though. As a leader, you're always on, right? You're always on at Light of Life in your director of development role. You're always on at L3 leadership in your president role. You're always on at home as an active husband and father. You're always on in the community. You're always on with, church and other volunteer relationships and responsibilities. How does someone, like many of the leaders that we're probably talking to right now, that's doing these kind of things, find the opportunity to recharge? Talk about that a little bit.
Yep. So I would say until January in 2020, I was horrible at this and never took a break. And then I started getting good at this, and then COVID-19 happened and that all went out the window. But what I will return to, and actually things are starting to get more normalized after that first month of COVID-19, which was crazy. But I would just say this, and again, I'm a person of faith. There's a book I read this year that literally is the best book I've read in the last 5 years, and it's called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. Again, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. Now, again, he's a pastor, so for those of you who aren't a person of faith, it may not be for you, but for me, he spoke to so many things in that book. But the two things that really transformed how I live and rest as a leader are, one is the implementation of a Sabbath. And before, if you would have said Sabbath to me, I would just laugh and be like, whatever. But he actually, I'm an Enneagram 7. I want to make everything fun. He made it sound fun. And there was a quote in there. It's basically like, man, your Sabbath day, and for those who aren't in faith, it just means a whole day off where you don't do anything having to do with work. You don't think about work. You don't solve problems. You just you rest and have fun. And there was a quote in there who basically said, like, our Sabbath or our rest day should be the day we look forward to most each week and the day that we reflect back on most throughout the week, because it was so meaningful. And it's a day filled with friendship and memories made with your family and days sleeping in and cooking meals together. And so my wife and I started implementing that, and it's been unbelievable. And alongside with that, he also encouraged you to do a digital detox. And there's a phone app called, I think it's just called Moment, in the Moment app, and it's wonderful. And they have a boot camp to help you have a digital detox. It literally cut my phone time in half, which was absolutely amazing. I had no idea how addicted to my phone I was. And the scary part is it tracks how long you're on, which most phones do, but it also tracks how many times you pick up your phone a day. And you want to talk about a scary stat? That's scary. So I would just say implement a day off where you do nothing and you solve no problems. And of course, there's going to be days where you have to do something, but make it a sacred day for you and your family and do a digital detox. It'll be one of the best things you do. So that would be what I would tell people.
Awesome. Doug, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing your insights with us. How can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about L3 leadership, want to learn more about Light of Life, you in general? What's the best way?
For Light of Life, just go to lightoflife.org and you'll see everything there. We're based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're a nonprofit that serves the homeless men, women, and children of our city. So if you're in Pittsburgh, would love to connect with you. Would love to have you come down to the mission for a tour. If you're into leadership development, you can just go to l3leadership.org and you'll find all the ways to connect with us on there. I don't know when this will air, but we just released a free course for leaders called How to Lead Through Crisis. And this is something we're doing for our members on a consistent basis, where we're going to be developing courses to help you grow and develop as a leader in addition to those live monthly webinars. But this one's available for free for the public. So if you think that would add value to you, you can just hop on our website and get access to that. So Andrew, thank you for having me. I love everything you do. I learn from you literally every day, I feel like. And so just thank you for being a leader, putting content out there. Everything you do matters. And I'm just honored to call you a friend.
Hey, man, appreciate you. Same here. And I also learn from you every day. In fact, I was listening to one of your recent podcasts this morning before we jumped on this. So appreciate everything you're doing for the community. And thanks for being here.
Thanks, man. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Henny Jewelers. They're a jeweler owned by my friend and mentor, John Henny. My wife, Laura, and I both got our engagement and our wedding rings at Henny Jewelers, and we absolutely love them. Not only do they have great jewelry, but they also invest in people. In fact, they give every engaged couple a book to help them prepare for their marriage, and we just love that. And so if you're in need of a good jeweler, check out Henny Jewelers at hennyjewelers.com. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, BAB Inc. BAB is an insurance broker, a third-party administrator, and consulting firm led by my friend and mentor, Russell Livingston. Russell is extremely passionate about developing the next generation of leaders, which is why he's partnering with us on this podcast, and he's also opened up his offices here in Pittsburgh to host our monthly leadership events, and we are extremely grateful for that. The nonprofit that I work at, Light of Life Rescue Mission, started using BAB as our insurance broker around 3 years ago, and we've had an unbelievable experience with them, and we highly recommend them. So if you or your organization has any insurance needs, please check out and learn more about BAB at babbins.com. That's BABBINS.com. Well, hey, everyone, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Andrew. I hope it added value to your life. You can find ways to connect with Andrew and everything he's doing and links to everything that we discussed in the show notes at l3leadership.org/episode 251. As always, if this podcast added value to your life, it would mean the world to me if you would share it with another leader that it would add value to. And while you're at it, if you have time, please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It does make a difference and helps us to add value to more leaders, so thank you in advance for that. And as always, I like to end with a quote, and I'll quote John Maxwell. He has been on fire through this crisis, just saying some great things. And he said this. He said, "The question is not, how am I going to get through this? But rather, how am I going to get better because of this?" And I think that's the question that we all need to be asking in the midst of this crisis. Not, how am I going to get through it, but how am I going to get better? Leader, get better every day. Thanks for allowing us to be a part of your life. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we will talk to you next episode.